moment is a critical moment. We have a responsibility as the diaspora to seize it, to unite, and be prepared to pull our funds together so our Africa cannot be taken away from us. We owe it to our children, our grandchildren, and generations to come. What is in Africa belongs to them. It is their inheritance, and we must defend it by any means necessary. Let's unite.
Hello, brothers and sisters. I hope you're all doing fine from wherever you're watching me from. Now, Dr. Arikana Chihombori has been a very good advocate for the unity of Black people. Now, she has been calling out the African diaspora to come back home and invest. Now, in this speech, she calls out on all Black people to come back in the motherland, build this motherland, and make it self-sustainable. Now, this is the kind of leaders we need, and this is the kind of speeches we want to hear in Africa. And this is the message that we must spread and share widely with the people who have not been aware of whatever is going on in the motherland. Now, let's listen to this speech, then have a quick discussion at the end of it. Thank you so much.
It's something that we need to understand if, as Black people, if we are going to change our circumstances in the world. We are the most disrespected race by design. We were systematically brainwashed. We were systematically put in the state of mind that we are in. If you look at, let's take you back to Africa, prior to the children of Africa being taken out of Africa as slaves, and even after they were taken out of Africa as slaves, the instructions that the missionaries were given in terms of how to deal with the African. Remember, when they came to Africa, they found very resistant people, very well-established religious educational systems, people who were so strong that they didn't know how they could conquer Africa unless they addressed the issues of Africa from the core. So they set out a process of letting us believe that everything to do with Black and African was bad, and everything to do with white was better. White and European was better. We have to understand that the missionaries were given instructions on how to instruct us and how to control our minds. They were told to teach us how to read, but not to reason. It was a systematic process, specific instructions on how to handle a Black person in order to get them where they wanted us to be. They used the same process with the slaves on the plantations, where they began this process of divide and conquer, lighter-skinned people versus darker-skinned people, the straighter your nose versus the flatter your nose, thin lips versus thick lips. It was a process that we have been put through. We have been trained to self-hate. I use the example of religion. And I use an example of myself growing up in Zimbabwe. The British did not come to Zimbabwe until 1896. Prior to their coming, we did not know of white color or Black color. We were Africans. We were Africans. But the missionaries came in and they told us about Christianity. They told us about Jesus Christ. They told us about the angels who were white and the devil who was Black. Then they turn around and say, the angels are desirable. They do the wonderful things. We must aspire to be like them. And they said, oh, by the way, we may not look like this white sheet of paper. Besides, remember, they introduced the color white and the color Black. We didn't have that. So we know how Black looks like. We know how white looks like. But they turn around and say, the angels are white and we are white too. Never mind how we look. We may not look like this piece of paper, but believe we are white. And we represent the angels. And you're Black. You may not look like this cover of my phone, which is Black, but you represent the devil. The devil is Black. The devil is evil. We all must run away from the devil. You don't want to represent the devil. Oh, by the way, you may not look like this Black piece of paper, but you're Black too. Then now let's go to church. And we kneel down in front of the white angels, in front of white Jesus, who we know very well Jesus Christ was not white. Even their own Bible tells us he had crimson skin. We know for a fact that when Mary and Joseph were running away from King Herod, they were told to go to Egypt. Why? Because in Egypt, Jesus Christ would blend with those who look more like him. If he was white, they would have told them to run to Europe. So we have all these obvious lies that we have been told. So for centuries, we have knelt and worshipped white Jesus and white angels and denied that which they told us represented us. So they systematically put us through a process of self-hate. It is not by surprise that we hate ourselves. We don't like each other. We don't trust each other. Understand that this has been a systematic process of criminalizing Blackness, of teaching us and training us to hate everything that looks like us, and educating that the more we look closer to what white people do, the better off we are. So we spend the rest of our lives and the lives of our children and the lives of generations to come, if we do not do something about it, hating ourselves, teaching our children to hate ourselves. We are a sick people. Let's face it. We need healing. We have been so brainwashed to hate ourselves. We have been so brainwashed to the point that even the obvious lies, we hear them, we know they're lies, but we can't get ourselves to unbelieve. I believe in Jesus Christ. What I have problems with is what they have done with the name of Jesus Christ. Abused his name, misrepresented his name. Religion, they have used it as an instrument to brainwash us. I believe in the religion. It is how it is taught to us and presented to us. It is distorted. It is no longer the truth that the Bible speaks of. But we know better. Because when we are lied to, we know it. Why do we find it so difficult to denounce those lies? The lies that Martin Luther King spoke about. We know we do some of the dumbest things. A Black man opens a shop in a Black neighborhood, and the minute a Chinaman opens a shop next door to them, we Black people, we stop patronizing a Black man and we run to the Chinaman. It's the case of the white man's ice is colder. How sick can we be? How dumb can we be? Even in the face of obvious truths, it's easier for us to believe a white man when they lie to us because the white man said so. The question is, how long will it take us to understand that those are lies that we have been told, that we have been programmed to hate ourselves? Understand your history. That will begin the process of healing. Understand what has been done to you. Understand that you're riding somebody else's train, going in somebody else's direction towards their own destination. Your train is in the next track. It should be going in the opposite direction. That is where your destiny is. Understand that you are the father of humanity. Understand, as a Black woman, you are the mother of humanity. You gave birth to the first human being. Understand that before they were, you were. So as the father and mother of humanity, why do you accept the lies? Why do you allow those you gave birth to, those whose sheer existence depends on you, to abuse you? Understand your history. Understand where you have been. Stand on the tallest mountain and let the world know the facts that they themselves have uncovered. They went to Europe, looking for the origins of humanity. They couldn't find it there. They went everywhere around the world looking for the origins of humanity. They couldn't find it until they came to our Africa. So stand on top of the tallest mountain and proclaim to the world who you are. But that starts with your understanding of your history. Let the world know that you're the beautiful, intelligent, sophisticated, highly adaptable, and totally indestructible original person, original human being, the African. So yes, it was a long answer, but you needed to hear it from the beginning. Starts It starts, it stays, and it ends with your understanding of your history. Know your history, know where you have been, and understand and accept first and foremost that we are a wounded people and we need healing. And that healing begins with one having a serious conversation with the image in the mirror. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Very passionately presented. I will say that if the color coding was intentional, and for that matter, it was also false, why do we continue to call ourselves blacks and call others whites or yellow or whatever? Why don't we just stop using that categorization and simply call ourselves Africans?
You're quite right.
Yeah.
I speak to that. I speak to that all the time. Again, we're just accepting the blatant lies. My brother, I'm looking at you, you're looking at me. I don't blend with my black hair. I don't blend with my black dress. So yes, those are lies. We need to undo them. So maybe there needs to be a movement that needs to start to say we are Africans and we refuse to be color-coded anymore, because that color coding, it goes to the core of who we are. Look at that little experiment they did on CNN with Anderson Cooper, with little girls being given white dolls and black dolls. Even black kids at that early age, they preferred the white doll. So it's deep. So yes, we can change it. We can begin by saying we're Africans, no more color, because that is, it was used to divide us. It was used to self-hate. So I agree with you. I think there should be a movement to refuse to be called black and be called African. It's up to us to start that movement.
All right, thank you. I'm still going to stay with you on one more point before we are going to have a continuation of our interaction more informally. On the issue of the diaspora, what is the role of the diaspora to Africa's future, and vice versa, Africa's role in the diasporan future?
A very important question. The issue of brain drain goes to the core of who the diaspora are and what the diaspora mean to the continent. So to understand the diaspora and their significance in the history of Africa, to understand the diaspora in the history of us as Africans in the diaspora, you must understand the brain drain. The brain drain out of Africa started over 400 years ago, when the children of Africa were taken out of Africa as slaves. Remember, and I like to let everybody understand, descendants of the formerly enslaved, you are a product of what Africa, the best that Africa had. They took the best and the fittest out of Africa. They took the best that they felt could stand the long journey transatlantic. They took the best that they knew would survive on the plantations. So I want descendants of the formerly enslaved to know that don't you ever let anybody make you feel inferior. You are the cream de la cream of Africa. You are descendants of the cream de la cream of Africa. Stand up tall and let everybody know that. That brain started back then, followed by more recent immigrants who came in search of, who left Africa in search of greener pastures, running away from wars and famine. The end result is the intellectual capacity that Africa needs. Most of it, if not more than half of it, is in the diaspora. The reality is, as we speak, Africa does not have enough intellectual capacity, enough expertise to build the Africa that we want. It is precisely because of that reason that the heads of states are looking to the Chinese, the Europeans, and anybody else that wants to come to Africa, because we are in the diaspora. To bring things home, you take, for example, people talk about healthcare in Africa. There are more Ghanaian doctors in New York City than in the entire country of Ghana. How then do we improve healthcare in Ghana if the doctors are not there? President Nana Addo, he thought by building new hospitals and renovating new ones, that was how he was going to improve healthcare. To his surprise, half of those hospitals are sitting empty, not because there are no patients, but because there are no doctors. The same is true in every African country. The same is true in every sector, engineering, education. The diaspora are needed in order for us to build the Africa that we want. Allow me to point out and highlight that in this particular moment, this year, as we go into 2021, the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area is going to begin. What is the African Continental Free Trade Area? It is a decision that was agreed upon by the African heads of states in 2018. It is a decision that has begun the process of finishing the unfinished business, which was started by our Pan-African fathers when they met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in 1963, when they ended up with a compromise decision, which they called the Organization of African Unity. The whole purpose of that mission of the meeting was to undo the damage that was done by the Berlin Conference. But unfortunately, they were not able to reach a consensus. Africa was intentionally divided into the tiny little countries that we are today for the purposes of disrupting economic development. If countries cannot trade with each other as neighbors, you cannot grow your economies. So yes, the Berlin Conference was about disrupting economic development. Finally, the African Continental Free Trade Area is getting ready to remove the boundaries that have kept the African countries from trading with each other. What does that mean? That means now you can register your company in one country and spread like wildfire throughout the continent. That means the Chinese realizing that it's now easier to do business in Africa. They're getting ready to quadruple their presence in an Africa that is easy to do business. The Europeans, they're getting ready to quadruple their presence in Africa. The exploitation is getting ready to be of Africa is getting ready to be taken to another level by those who have exploited us for centuries. Here is the reality, my brothers and sisters. It is important that every diaspora understands the African Continental Free Trade Area. Google it, understand it. The reality is there's a void in Africa. It is a void that is to be filled by the African diaspora if we are going to build the Africa that we want. Remember, the Europeans for centuries have built the Africa that they wanted, the Africa that benefited them to our detriment. This void is there. It is waiting for us to fill it. It's waiting for us to be on the driver's seat. Because beginning next year, we're going to be talking about a continental development agenda for Africa. No more shall we talk about how much wheat does Nigeria need, but rather how much wheat do 1.27 billion people in Africa need? How do we build the Cape to Cairo highway? How do we build the Senegal to Djibouti highway and everything in between? We are talking about developing a continent. We're talking about meeting the needs of 1.27 billion people in a collective way. Here is where we are going to fall short. While the others are ready to jump in and take over your Africa, your inheritance, the diaspora don't even know about the African Continental Free Trade Area, let alone even think about organizing in order to take over what belongs to you. So the role of the diaspora is to understand what is going on in Africa, to understand that this is now an opportunity for Black people to build generational wealth, to earn and build economic liberation, an opportunity that has been denied all Black people on the continent and outside the continent. The African Continental Free Trade Area is an opportunity for the diaspora to unite and to go home and fill that void that has your name. Take over that seat that has your name. If we do not come together as the diaspora private sector and unite with the diaspora, with the private sector on the continent, Africa is going to be taken over, this time for good, by those who have exploited us for centuries. This moment is a critical moment. We have a responsibility as the diaspora to seize it, to unite, and be prepared to pull our funds together so our Africa cannot be taken away from us. We owe it to our children, our grandchildren, and generations to come. What is in Africa belongs to them. It is their inheritance, and we must defend it by any means necessary. Let's unite.
Hello, brothers and sisters. I hope you're all doing fine from wherever you're watching me from. Now, we all know that Dr. Arikana Chihombori and the president of Burkina Faso, Dr. Ibrahim Traoré, have delivered a very impactful speeches and discussions and interviews in the last few years. Now, they have always addressed matters regarding Africa's liberation. They have discussed about Africa's unity and Black folks' unity. Now, they have always addressed matters concerning the African diaspora. And it is for this case that I find it very important to talk about them. I find it very important because they have been addressing key issues that needs discussion by all Black folks around the world. Now, they have been talking about the reclamation of Africa continental resources back to the motherland and making sure that no one exploits Africa the more. Now, we all know that Dr. Chihombori has been a key advocacy of the children of Africa coming back home and investing in this motherland. Now, she has gone ahead and talked about various ways in which the government in Africa must stop being puppets and make sure that the children of Africa are back home, that the children of Africa who have suffered long in the hands of the colonizers, in the hands of the oppressors in the land of Babylon, come back home and invest. Now, we all know that she's a medical doctor and former African Union ambassador who said no to puppet behaviors after she was being given orders on how to do things and how to help the white people exploit Africa. Now, she said no, and this is when she started the liberation on telling the truth about the things that are affecting Africa and the motherland. Now, since she started her movement, we've been seeing significant movements around Africa. We've been seeing people rising. We've seen the likes of Ibrahim Traoré saying, this is the person I want to work with, and we want to make sure that we liberate Africa and we bring the African diaspora back home and make sure they invest here and bring their skills back in the motherland so that we get away from depending on these Western aid and from the US and all these other countries. And I'm very happy to actually see these things happening, because if we as the Black people are not going to realize that no one wants best for us, then we are doomed. Because the only way, I repeat, the only way for us to realize success, the only way for this continent to be great, and the only way for the Black people to be great again is one by uniting and making sure that we stop the exploitation of resources in Africa. We stop the exploitation of our people. Now, when I say the exploitation of our people, I simply mean our people were used to build America. Our people were used to build France, UK, and all these Western countries. But what did they get in return? We all know that they got systematic racism waiting for them, oppression waiting for them, race profiling, and all these other stuff. And this is why we say, if we must unite, then we must start with the Black unity. If we must unite, then we must start speaking the same language. Let's not play drift games that someone is calling other people to the right and others are going to the left, or we are going to have so many functions within ourselves. And this is when the oppressors always found it so easy to manipulate Africa and to continue exploiting Africa. So if we, the people in Africa, are not going to stand by the standards that we are going to put, we are not going to unite, we are not going to speak the same language, we are done, brothers. Now, I just want to tell you some other things that you do not know about this lady called Chihombori, Dr. Arikana. Now, Dr. Arikana has been talking about the self-sustainability of Africa as a continent. Now, she has gone ahead to start a movement, and in this movement, she has called out women to join her and to make sure that they support the liberation of Africa. Now, we all know and we've always assumed that African countries are independent, right? But that's not true, because we still use their languages. We still speak French in Africa. We still speak Spanish. If you go to other countries, in the Western countries, you might think you are in France or Lyon or somewhere in Marseille. This is not the same thing that we want. We want an African continent where we speak African language. We speak Swahili or whatever language that we might set up in Africa and run away from this colonialism. If we continue using their policies, if we still continue to use their education systems in Africa, if we are still using their government structures in Africa, that we must have a president sitting at the top, then we must have ministers and we must have so many other things, then we are done. Africa was a very big village. It was a very big country. And that country was divided when they went to Berlin. And they divided Africa into pieces. And they made sure every country got a colonizer who enforced the people to start speaking their languages, to start training their children to speak French, Belgium, and all this other stuff. And if we say today that we want to run away from these Western countries, then we must be so realistic on how we are going to do this. We are still having them in our history books. What are they doing in our history books? For example, I usually say that I learned a lot of white history while in my own country. And even at the highest level of study, even at the very top university that I went to, they still taught me the same thing. They still taught me that I must learn about the US government. I must learn about how European powers have been successful all these years. That I must learn how their government structures are. And to my utter surprise, we talk little about ourselves. We talk little about our own continent. And this is how they want it to be. They want us to assume that they are the factors of good. And we, the people in Africa, have always been the dark side of this world, that we've always brought the negative energy. And when I talk about this, I talk with a lot of passion, because when you see the characters that black people play in movies, the characters, the roles that they are given, and you are going to realize they are given the roles of traitors or policemen without integrity or very corrupt individuals, drug smugglers, and all these other bad titles, or cheating husbands. And you sit down and you say, this is not how black people have been structured, and this is not how we grew up, and this is not how we were taught to behave when we turn out to be adults. They talk about drug smuggling and all this other stuff, and they forget that Mexico and all these other countries in the Western countries is where you find the highest number of drug abuse and drug smuggling. And I'm not talking it in a bad perspective, but I'm talking it in a way that I'm using statistics that are given on the internet. And when you check out that drug abuse in Africa is actually low compared to the one in the US. Now, talk about morals, black morals, and you are going to see how black people raise their children. Black people have always raised their children with a lot of discipline. So when we are trying to bash out black people and trying to bring out bad vibes from them, trying to give them negative roles in their movies and all this stuff, it only means, and it says a lot on how some people think about the black folks. So when someone like Dr. Chihombori comes out to say, we must unite, when Ibrahim Traoré comes out to say, we must unite, when Julius Malema, when Pilo Lumumba are speaking out for the unity of black people, it hasn't started today. It started way back when Malcolm X was speaking before his assassination. When Martin Luther King was going around and saying we should unite as black people, he went around and united black people in the diaspora. This is the same energy we want, and we want to change how things have been in the motherland, and we want to see our own brothers coming back home and really investing, and if not investing, actually living here in the motherland and making sure that everything in the motherland works for them. Thanks so much for having taken the time to watch this video. I appreciate so much. So I really have something to discuss with you, a little bit off topic, and I've been seeing people trying to ask on how they should come back to the motherland, and if there is a very solid process put in place by the governments in Africa to make sure that they come safe, maybe own property, and maybe stay in Africa. I want to tell you that we are going to have a very live discussion coming this Sunday, God willing, that we are going to be live, and I have so many other brothers and sisters from the diaspora who are in Kenya, and they are going to try and discuss with you the process and how it goes and the requirements that are needed. Sometimes we really need to hear from the horse's mouth. Thank you so much for having time to watch this video. I appreciate so much. One love. See you in my next episode.